The past few months, the US men's national team and El Tri have been battling for dual nationals, great dual nationals such as David Ochoa, Julian Araujo, Ricardo Pepi, Jonathan Gomez, and in the past, even Jonathan Gonzalez. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Futbol, and in today's episode, we're going to dive into dual nationals, El Tri and US men's national team. Along with that, we will be talking about the US Soccer Federation, some MLS, soccer culture in other countries, with a very special guest. Herc Gomez will be here in this episode, so hopefully you guys enjoy. Pete from 11 Yanks will be here as well. His link's going to be on the description. Before we start, because I won't request this during the episode, hit that like button if you enjoy this type of content, and we'll do more. Sit back, relax, and just enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to part 2 of the interview with Herc here. You guys had Pete do a lot of talking. Now I'm going to do more of my talking here as well. And then Pete, you feel free to interrupt whenever you want. And Herc, thank you for taking the time to being at both channels. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
You're in big trouble. Everyone that comes here gets in trouble. All right.
Yeah, standard.
So Herc, for the first question here, you might want to get your Twitter account for this one.
Mine?
I want to ask you, how many days has it been since Diego Lainez has scored for Real Betis?
Oh, man, that's a good question. League goals. We have to be very explicit on this. League goals, because people get upset. I don't know. It's got to be what, over 1,070 days.
I think it's getting close to that. I was just hoping we should have got Seba Salazar here just to call you a troll again.
Yeah. By the way, people don't realize how intelligent that guy is, but he's also a huge diehard El Tri fan and everything in Mexican soccer. Like, people are like, they sometimes think it's an act what we do. No, we really disagree. And this show was, let me very quickly just tell you how Futbol Americas came to be a show. First time Sebastian Salazar and I met, we were actually hired around the same time for ESPN. My first assignment is in San Diego working the US men's national team versus Serbia game at January camp. And he's running the desk. I'm doing commentary with Casey Keller. And everybody was in the hotel bar getting like drinks after the game. And then everybody disperses. Like, everybody's like leaving. I'm going home. I have a flight out here. Well, we were both two of the guys that are like staying the night and then leaving. My wife was pregnant at the time with my firstborn. Must have been like 3-4 months pregnant. And we are sitting there having drinks. My wife's like, listen, I'd love to talk football with you guys all day, but I'm leaving you guys. You guys are getting a little too loud as well. Comes back, and my wife's like, why are you guys yelling at each other? Like, what are you doing? You're making spectacles of yourselves, you two idiots. We literally argue about everything. It's like, I feel one thing is blue, he feels it's red, but he really feels it's red, and he will defend it to the death.
Interesting. I actually love that. That's soccer culture right there.
Yeah. That's exactly
Well, I remember when I was in Italy one time, I was sitting in a cafe in Milan, and I don't speak Italian, but I was, sitting there with a friend who was Italian, and I kept hearing these two guys behind me yelling. Now, Italians yell all the time. It's just part of their culture. But the two words I kept picking up on were Inzaghi and Vieri, right? So this was way back in the early 2000s, two of their strikers. Who was better? And so I asked the guy in front, I said, what are they talking about? What are they saying? And there are all the pros and cons of each striker, strengths, weaknesses, and they're very angry because they both think the other guy is better. This conversation went on for 3 hours, Herc.
Oh, yeah.
3 hours about this one topic. And I remember sitting there thinking, I wish I could do that in the US with somebody. Like, I wish I could sit there for 3 hours and yell about Pulisic versus Reina or, anything.
Yeah, you know what it is, Pete, and I'm sure, Filippo, you guys have seen this before, just in other footballing cultures when you watch the shows. There is no right answer to anything. It's all opinion. There is no absolutes, and people need to understand that there are no absolutes.
Yeah.
This is opinion. But it does matter. The dialogue does matter. Discourse does matter. Sebi and I, sometimes in the production meetings, get so animated, like it becomes uncomfortable for the rest of production. And we've got like high level ESPN Plus execs on our production meetings. Like one of our execs, Tim Dwyer, he's such a soccer fan. Who wants to be there. Like, this is what people don't realize. They talk about the growth in the sport. He's my age, and we're now getting this generation. I just spoke about this. COOs, the marketing directors, the businessmen who are fans. they're getting interested in what we're talking about. So he shows up to all the production meetings. He shows up when Futbol Americas is on the road in Vegas. Like, you know, when Futbol Americas is here in LA doing something special, like this man will show up because he cares about the program. He cares about what we're talking about. But it gets so uncomfortable, and you can see everybody's faces when Stephanie and I are going at each other. How we go at each other in production, we couldn't put on TV. But these are discussions that happen, like you guys say, in normal, like everyday, you know, footballing cultures.
Which I think we can have here too. I really do. I think, like I said, it's an evolving culture, right?
Correct.
So I think we can get maybe not there, but close to there.
So before I lead to the first question, because what I'm about to say will lead into it, both of you grew up mostly, well, Pete grew up abroad too, Herc mostly in the US, pretty much your whole childhood.
My whole childhood. I was born in Los Angeles, grew up in Vegas, left when I was 18, and then from there just kind of nomading around.
So just to add one thing, I grew up a good part of my middle school in Brazil because I was born in Brazil, then moved to California, then back to Rio, then back to New York, and now I'm in Florida. So I keep moving around. And in Brazil, during middle school, first thing to know, me and most of the boys in the class, we would go to school with cleats, no shoes, cleats.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. Second thing, when your team would play some of your friends' team, you would be nervous all week about that game in the club. I would be, what am I gonna do? Because my team is Palmeiras from São Paulo, and I lived in Rio de Janeiro. So I would have all these Flamengo fans in my class, and I was just like, what if I lose? How am I gonna deal with all these guys?
Exactly. Yeah.
There's not that here, to be honest. But I loved it. It was weird. It was a weird feeling. Sometimes you would feel like crap, but it was just something special about it.
You know what? I don't know if there's not that here in the States. I just think there are certain communities that are being underrepresented. Because if you go somewhere in California and it's like Oxnard, for example, Oxnard is known for a few things. You know, I grew up in Oxnard for a bit, which is where David Ochoa is from. Oxnard is known for agriculture. So the people that work there are farm workers. They pick fruit, they pick produce. Boxers, La Colonia Gym. It's a huge boxing community. A lot of world champion, elite boxers have come out of Oxnard. And soccer, El Parque del Sol. Like I remember my dad's men's league team. So there's certain pockets of certain communities where these discussions are happening. These take my cleats to school things are happening, but they're not represented at certain levels within our footballing pyramid, if you will. But they are happening.
Which leads us to the first question here, which definitely from a former player perspective and soccer analyst now that you are as well, you're probably one of the best ones to talk about this, which is the whole dual national wars between the U.S. men's national team and El Tri right now, which it has happened in the past, but it seems like it spiced up a little bit right now with David Ochoa, Julian Araujo. It started maybe a little bit more with Jonathan Gonzalez a couple years back, Ricardo Pepi now too. So what I wanted to talk to you about this, because I do have some feelings about it as a dual national. You do as well. And Pete is a dual national too, even though he's much more straight up American. I feel like in this sense, would you agree, Pete, that me and Herc are a little bit more mixed in that
Yeah,
culture?
I mean, mine's very different because I was born to American parents, but I grew up in Thailand. I was born in Thailand and grew up there, which is a very soccer crazy country as well. They're just not good at it. I mean, they're nuts about it.
Right,
They're just not good at it. But yeah, it's a different situation for me. But go ahead.
Yeah. So Herc, from these players, I wasn't a professional player because I'm not good. So you were. How much do you think when they decide, and we're gonna get a lot of decisions in the next few months, years of these players, how much do you think it's a career decision, heritage, passion decision, or family ties? What do you think plays the biggest role, or do you think it's unique to each player?
I do think it's unique to each player. We had Jonathan Bond on Futbol Americas, and he is actually a dual national as well. He had the opportunity to represent the Welsh national team at a youth level, but he's English born, and he also had the opportunity to represent the English national team, which never happened to him. But we spoke about that. What do you recommend to a guy like Julian Araujo? And he was like, you know what? At that age, sometimes family could be a detriment to you. You're listening to family members, you're getting their opinion and what they think you should do instead of you just being you and enjoying the moment. And people should know you're too young to make a decision that vital at that age. Because things change, right? Now, I've always said this, if all things are equal, the love and respect you have for two different countries, if all that is equal, I appreciate the opportunities that I've been given here in the States. that I've been afforded where I've been born, but I also appreciate the strong roots I have in Mexico. And I love both countries equally. If all things are equal and your heart's divided, well, other factors are going to come into play, right? Where do I have more opportunity? Where do I fit in more? What's my life going to be like? Footballing wise, sporting wise, after, these are all things that should come into play. It's not as cut and dry. And I see this all the time where just pick one. What do you feel? You should know if you feel more Mexican or if you feel more American. It's not that cut and dry. And we hear a lot of now about ni de aquí ni de allá. This sense, especially for Hispanic Americans, and I'm sure for a lot of dual nationals as well, but it became popular in the Chicano community of a sense of you don't fit in either. Because I don't know, Filippo, if you grew up the same way, but have you ever been told, stop acting white, stop talking like a white boy or a white guy? These are things Hispanic Americans have been told here in the States by other Hispanic Americans. Or if you go back to Brazil, like when most Mexicans who are Chicanos go back to Mexico.
I'm a gringo there.
You're a gringo. Why do you talk like that? You're a gringo.
Yeah,
oh,
why do you dress like
gringo.
that?
Why do you, exactly. So you feel like, wait a second. So I'm not fully accepted here and I'm not fully accepted there. I'm just somewhere in the middle. And it's a crazy, crazy feeling. And trust me, I've been in that situation where I'm all alone at 18 in a different country, a country that's very much foreign to me. Maybe the customs and maybe the language and maybe the people around me are familiar in sight, but everything else is such a culture shock. I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and now I'm going to Pachuca, a coal mining city in the state of Hidalgo, and I'm alone, and it's like kind of like the culture shock that surrounds you with everything that is the country. And I'm sure it's the same way for a Mexican national if you just drop him in somewhere in the States. It's a huge culture shock, and it's a crazy feeling, but knowing that you're not truly accepted one place and you're not truly accepted another, and no matter what you do, you're going to be criticized. Like, I feel for these kids, I don't know what my life would have been like if I was forced to make a decision like that. I had, at 22 years old, I was doing really well with the Galaxy. I was MVP of our team as a developmental player, in a season that we won two trophies, the Open Cup and MLS Cup. And I had discussions with the Mexican U23 team because I knew one of their coaches who was a coach of mine when I played in Mexico. And I straight up told him, like, my focus right now is to keep playing here. And, I kind of feel good with the US. It's one of those decisions. But if it was where I'm in the limelight and this decision is thrown out there, like Julian Araujo, David Ochoa, where all these players like Jonathan Gomez have high profile decisions to make that will affect the rest of their life, the rest of their sporting, Efrain Alvarez sporting lives, that'd be difficult. I don't know who I would listen to, who I would lean to, where I would go, because you start getting ideas in your head. All I knew at that time when I was dealing with the Galaxy was that, I'm on the radar, the U.S. men's national team, That's all I knew, and that's all I was focused on. I was born in Los Angeles. I was educated in the States. I had my whole life here. It just felt natural to me, even though everybody I know is a Mexico fan. To me, it felt natural. That doesn't mean I want Mexico to lose when I see them playing. I grew up watching players like Cuauhtémoc Blanco, Luis Garcia, but I also grew up watching Kobe Jones, Eric Winalda. My father used to tell me about his father's sporting store, his soccer store, and how his dad always treated my dad well. So I like idolized Eric Winalda growing up just because of that, because even though I didn't grow up watching MLS because we didn't have it when I was growing up, I idolized these guys because they were from where I was from, close to where I was from, doing the same things I was doing. So it's a difficult discussion. You touch upon identity, and those things are always delicate subjects. But going back to answer your question, it is case by case, and I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I'll let Pete also talk. I think Pete wants to say something, right? No?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, for my case, at least, if I was good enough to play for any national team between Brazil and the US, mine would be 100% based on career, mine specifically, because it's what you said too. I actually feel included in both countries, but at the same time, I don't feel like I am that country.
Right? Exactly.
I go to Brazil, and my Portuguese is fluent. I have a big Brazilian soccer culture. People see this here on the channel. Some even say I'm too negative or toxic. It's just the passion of soccer that we have there. But then I also feel included in the United States. But I also don't feel like, I'm just American. So for me, it would be 100% career decision. And I think a lot of these kids, like David Ochoa, for example, I do believe he feels somewhat similar in that sense, right?
Of course he does.
He has the Mexican heritage, which is probably very strong, right? Probably very Mexican heritage in his household for him, but he's American. He's American from born and raised here.
Here's the difference with everything else, and I completely agree with what you're saying. Now imagine if Brazil and the United States men's national team hated each other. Imagine if they were the biggest rivals in the region. Imagine that. That's where these kids are stuck at. That's why it's so unique. It's so unique, unlike any other dual national out there, because these German Americans, you played for Germany, maybe at youth national team level, and you have ties to the U.S. and you can play for the U.S., but you're not in the soccer culture where they hate each other, where they despise each other.
Yeah. These
kids are caught right in the middle. So no matter what they do, a tsunami of negativity is coming their way. The things that David Ochoa would get thrown at him, the xenophobic comments, and listen, xenophobia, discrimination, racism, all these stupid things that get thrown around aren't exclusive to one nation, to one genre. They're everywhere. They're prevalent all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
But these kids, no matter what, are going to get that. I mean, I'm almost, I don't want to say immune to this criticism, but you should see my mentions, my DMs, when Major League Soccer's playing, from Mexican fans, when the U.S. men's national team loses, from Mexican fans, or when something happens in favor of Americans over Mexico, it gets downright ugly. And these kids are put right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine having this decision. And I've spoken to David Ochoa a few times. I've gotten to know him. I know he's a good kid. I know it's a difficult decision. I also know these players struggle with that, because at the end of the day, they're still kids. I mean, he's a teenager, for God's sakes.
Yeah. It's interesting with reading Ricardo Pepi's statement when he chose the U.S. as well. Just like a kid who grew up in El Paso and literally spent his entire childhood going back and forth between the border, family and friends in Mexico, family and friends in the U.S. And just hearing his, I'm so close to each of these cultures. Honestly, I got a little teary-eyed reading it, because my experience is completely different, but just the small times that I've experienced, being an American growing up in Thailand, speaking the language fluently and yet never feeling Thai at all,
right.
Or even being an American in England, trying to study the game and learn about the game. And it's just a small of what he must have experienced, from both sides, and how difficult it is. And yet I'm so passionate about, once I make my decision, this country's given me opportunities, I'm going to leave my heart and soul on the field for the U.S. like that.
Yeah.
That did something inside me,
Yeah.
But Herc, let me just leave one thing clear. I'm still upset on David Ochoa, okay? I'm still upset.
You should because he's a quality player, and the ceiling is high there. But think about this for a second. You just spoke on, Pete, the wave of emotion that came over you when Ricardo Pepi's declaring himself for the U.S. men's national team. Players like him and Santiago Munoz, same region, same age group, almost nemesis growing up, playing against each other, have kept the door open for both.
Yeah.
I interviewed Santi Munoz, and he literally said, whoa, hold on a second. I don't want to, correct you, but I have to. I'm not married to Mexico. He literally said that. So he's completely leaving the door open, and Mexican fans see that, and they're like, screw that guy. Let him go then, whatever. Yeah. And then he goes on a different outlet, and he says, I'm fully proud of representing Mexico, and I can't wait to represent Mexico at a senior national team level. So it almost looks like they're playing both sides, but all they're doing is being honest with themselves, even though it's the thing, they can get confused in their own heads of how to express it, but they're just being honest with who they are. And people don't know how to process that. I'm sure maybe you in Thailand, Pete, have felt this way. I'm sure, Filippo, I hear all the time this perception on the outside looking in of what an American is supposed to be. People don't realize who the American fan is today. And when I speak of this revolution of the new U.S. men's national team fan, the new American fan, it's this dual culture. And when more people realize what it is to represent two different cultures and have a love and appreciation for two different cultures, more people will realize how delicate and complex these decisions are for these kids. Now, put yourself in the biggest rivalry in the region. It's a difficult thing to navigate.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sure.
I'm going to move on to the next question here, which is actually 2 in 1, which is about the U.S. Soccer Federation that me and Pete here are actually fairly critical of them. I think a lot of I think all the criticism we've done, it's fair so far. So 2 things in one. One, I've seen some podcasts where you mentioned in the past where because you are someone in the media that doesn't really bow to this, you go and you say what you think. Being right or wrong, you say what you think. You don't go towards anything that will get you a press pass, whatever it is. It's been harder sometimes to get an interview, your relationship with the U.S. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about your relationship with the U.S. Soccer Federation. Where do you think they've been good, if they have been good at anything? And where do you think they've been missing the point in a couple of things, such as maybe even the dual national war right now?
Yeah. Okay. It's complex.
For whatever you can say, obviously. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I'm never one to shy away. And when I say something, it's because I feel it. And when I speak of the U.S. Soccer Federation, there is no right and wrong. They're just facts. These are just things that have happened. You can make your own conclusions. But, I remember the first time I was critical of anybody in the U.S. Soccer Federation, and it was Sunil Gulati. And I was still an active player, I think, at the time. And it was about Bruce Arena being the right man for the job. And I was like, hey, I don't even know if that's the discussion. It's about Sunil Gulati being the right man for the job or not. This is why I was still an active player. I was now dabbling in the media. I was playing for Seattle Sounders, and I was working for Fox at the time, doing U.S. men's national team coverage for them. And out of nowhere, I get an email from Sunil Gulati, how disappointed he was in this and that, whatever. Next, it's me being critical of U.S. soccer and their handling of Jonathan Gonzalez, and how Thomas Rongman, a head scout for the U.S. men's national team, lies about being at Jonathan Gonzalez's house multiple times, to the extent where his father reaches out to me. So angry is the Gonzalez family that they're being portrayed like this, that he reaches out to me to set the record straight. Like, I've never met this individual. And I said, are you sure? And he goes, I think I would be sure if somebody was in my house.
Yeah. Very
very upset. And U.S. soccer being like, well, that's just Thomas. Like, hey, we all know how Thomas is. That's just Thomas. That's an excuse. And then it's anytime you're critical, getting emails, getting phone calls. And I know this, and I could say this because I am backed by a company like ESPN, where I could, whatever, my access does not depend on them. Others aren't so fortunate, and I don't know if that's been the case for others. I can't speak for other pundits. I can't speak for the access they have or don't have if they're being critical of U.S. soccer. I can only speak about my experiences. But they think I don't talk to players, I don't talk to staff, ex people in or around there. My name always comes up in a negative type of commentary from USSF towards me. And it gets back to me like, we will do this, but not if Herc's involved. To me, it just shows their insecurities. But you can see it. U.S. Soccer, their communications department tweeting, kind of lashing out at the women of like, we presented you this, and that's not, us using public relations. I'm paraphrasing, but them saying like, LFG, your movie was a publicity stunt, all these things. Like, they're just very insecure about the way they go about things. Yeah. And it comes off that way. And it's gotten to the point where they don't even reach out anymore. They used to reach out and like, hey, we'd like to set the record straight with you. We'd like to do this. And they set up phone calls, and it's, representatives here trying to set the record straight. They've just given up because they know like they're not going to change the way I feel. They're not going to change the way we feel here at ESPN. Whether they think it's right or wrong, it's our opinion on what we are seeing and what we're experiencing. So U.S. soccer can do a better job of, going back to the original question, of not being so insecure. Yeah. Now, they've gone about it wrong a lot. Do I think they're trying to get better? Yes. I think Greg's been crucial in a lot of this. Brian McBride's going to be very crucial. Ernie Stewart. Those are things. Kate McGrath on the women's side. Those are things that U.S. soccer didn't have before. It almost felt like the old boys network. We're going to do things a certain way because that's the way we've always done it. And screw everybody else. You don't know what you're talking about. I think they've learned from those mistakes, but they're just so insecure and think that their way is the right way and there is no other way, that it's detrimental at times.
I think also the fact that, the PR and communications people in U.S. soccer are the same people for the last 20 years. Like they're pretty much the same. And I think that's crucial because the way, in 2001, 2, 3, 4, it was a different soccer landscape. Now we have a much more educated, well-informed, passionate, outspoken fan base than we've ever had. And I think they're struggling to deal with that disparity.
And also this insecurity isn't just exclusive to U.S. soccer. Like, there are a lot of coaches, there are a lot of managers, there are a lot of people who don't deal with criticism very well. Like, I've had 45-minute, 1-hour discussions with head coaches, because they're not happy with something I've said, and they're used to having their way with the press at times, because in this footballing culture, we've not really been too negative, in its history. Now, over the years, trust me, that's turned completely upside down, and at times one can be overly quickly keen to kind of criticize, that just comes with the territory. But there is a huge insecurity with just U.S. soccer in general.
I think to me, I'm not going to go into everything I have to criticize them, mainly because I don't want Herc to be in the same video where I completely talk about the USSF,
Right.
because it'll be a little too much. But I think the two main issues, just very oversimplifying it to me, is one, I think they work in shady ways. Nothing's very clear. You never really know what's going on. So that's one of the issues I have. The other one is they have this very bad habit of the fault is mine, so I'm going to put it on whoever I want. And that's what they usually do a lot of the times. And I don't know, there's much more to it. I'm not going to get into mine. I wanted to hear Herc's thought, and I agree with everything you said, and I agree with everything Pete said as well.
Yeah, let me just, because I know this will get back to U.S. soccer some way or some shape.
Oh, it will.
Form. Yeah. People talk. Nothing is secret. You say or do something, it gets back to who you're saying it about in this industry. You don't have to be so insecure. One thing I do give Major League Soccer credit for, Don Garber, Dan Cortishman, they love, even if it's negative, they love the discourse, the dialogue. I've had discussions with, Dan Cortishman. He'll text me, he'll call me, and he'll talk about something, and they love that the dialogue is going on. U.S. soccer doesn't necessarily like that dialogue. They want to control the narrative. These two guys, my respects. I know that people will hate them for a bunch of different things, but they encourage the dialogue because they know it's good for business.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I hope whoever this gets to as well, if it does get to anyone, that they understand that we're not against them. We're all together in the same mission. We want soccer to grow. We want the MLS to grow. We want U.S. soccer to grow. I want to hopefully win a World Cup in my lifetime. See the U.S. I already seen Brazil win in 2002. I want to see the U.S. win World Cup.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to see Brazil win another one eventually in my life, but I want to see the U.S. win one, and hopefully they understand that we're not being critical.
You just want what all other footballing nations have when it comes to this sport. When it gets big, the attention gets big. It's grander, and so is the criticism. But I think there's room for everybody here. I just think we can't be so insecure about it all the time.
Yeah. So it's definitely about strong diversity of opinion. If you have diversity of opinion, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So just to wrap it up here, because we're running out of time, I won't be talking about MLS and Liga MX that we were going to talk about. Actually, Herc talked about it quite a bit at Pete's interview already, where the differences in culture, talked about the levels and everything, because Herc has played for both leagues a lot. He knows about both and different teams. So just to wrap it up, the last thing I wanted to talk about is very quickly on the current generation. One is just a quick yes or no question. The other one is in regards to the U.S. fan base. One, would you say on paper this is the most talented generation we ever had? Not accomplished, not the best, but the most talented.
Yes.
And then last but not least, do you think our U.S. soccer fan base should raise our standard along with the talent? Because a lot of people have, but a lot haven't. Yes?
Yes, raise your standard, raise your expectation, but also raise your knowledge. Like, if you thought you were going to go into Cuscatlán in El Salvador and just completely get a result, walk all over them because they're El Salvador and they're a small footballing nation, that's false. Mexico doesn't think that way. They understand the complexities of this region. And they're a better team. Mexico's a better team at the moment. So raise your expectations, raise your knowledge, but also understand the complexities. Like you're not playing Champions League level fields. You're not playing against Champions League level opponents. And trust me, I've played in situations where the level of the opponent isn't the greatest. So they do things normally other opponents won't do, and it changes the way you play, and not for better. These games are tricky. Raise expectations, raise demand on how they should play, but be realistic about what can be done as well.
I think that does it for here. Guys, as we said, obviously everyone knows who Herc is. Herc Gomez. You can follow him on Twitter and most certainly hear much more about him, his opinions, his takes on Futbol Americas and ESPN as well. And with Seba Salazar, which both have great chemistry, so it's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah.
And Pete, anything you want to add? Herc,
just quickly, I want to endorse that show because I watch Futbol Americas, quite regularly on ESPN Plus, guys. It's a great show. It's a great balance of the American, Mexican soccer landscapes and insight, and they really go at it hard, which I love. So check that show out. It's on ESPN Plus. Most of you are probably already subscribed.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Keep doing the good work, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.